NIL Now with Lauren Sisler and Kevin Jones.
If you want to learn more about name, image, and likeness, you need to go to The Source. The NIL Now podcast from Headline Studio and Reddit highlights the biggest storylines with comments from key guests in the college and high school NIL space.
NIL is not a cherry on top. It needs to be thought about as a part of these young men and women's future to, further their careers. You should be able to leave college with something.
Subscribe to NIL Now on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome in Rose City to the Soccer Made in Portland podcast. Ryan Clark here with Chris Reifer. It was a back and forth weekend for fans of PTFC, starting out with a 0-0 draw for the Portland Timbers against the Galaxy, the shorthanded, as we will discuss later in the podcast, Portland Timbers.
And shorthanded LA Galaxy.
And also the shorthanded LA Galaxy playing to what can only be described as one of the worst soccer matches in the history of the sport.
That was awful.
And
really terrible.
In better news, much more fun, exciting, positive news.
Purely
the Portland Thorns, were fantastic on Sunday. 4-0 over the Orlando Pride. The Portland Thorns win. Really comprehensive performance from a team that is looking exactly like the one that won the championship last year, if not better. You look at the different players on the field who contributed. Hina Sugita was all over the place, just dusting fools left and right and making great plays. Christine Sinclair running harder and playing with greater force than I saw all of last season. She's got that, World Cup mindset already in the first game of her club season. Sophia Smith doing what she does best, maybe not as lethal as she normally is, but didn't have to be when
lethal.
The rest of her team
pretty lethal.
Scored a goal, had an assist.
Are we throwing dirt on a multiple goal contribution game here?
See, that's the thing. It's like she's so great that like a multiple goal contribution game, you can.
And you're still like, that could have been more.
Could have been better. Yeah, exactly. No, she was great. In all honesty, but it definitely was a full team effort on the part of the Thorns. A couple good saves from Bella Bixby. The defense was superb in limiting Orlando's opportunities. Veteran back line that had no issues in communication and execution. You said on Twitter that they hardly put a foot wrong, and I think that is an excellent way to describe it. It was really an excellent performance.
Yeah, I'll start with the grain of salt. Just to kind of get it out there on the front end so we can just apply it to all of our comments going forward and nobody can criticize us, because that's the most important thing. Just making sure we can't be criticized. The grain of salt is that the Orlando Pride are really bad. They are who we thought they were, which is not much. And they are going to be toward the bottom of the league again this year. And that's, they looked every single bit of that in their performance on opening day. So, we can leave that as a standing comment. That said, the Thorns played in the way you would expect a very good team to dispatch with a very bad team on their home field. That's exactly what you want to see. From basically the opening whistle to the closing whistle, there was no question who was going to win that game. The Thorns were always going to win it. They were always going to win it by multiple goals. They were up multiple goals in the first half, and the Pride never looked like they had even a prayer of making anything out of the game. And that is great work, especially in the first week of the season. That's really impressive stuff. To come out and have a totally drama-free, completely dominant performance, even on their home field, is something that, frankly, we didn't see from a lot of the other contenders around the league, right? The Wave really struggled with a Red Stars team that I think a lot of us expected to take a little bit of a step back after some off-season attrition from Chicago. They went to San Diego, who I think you and I and basically everybody else think will be one of the best teams in the league this year at I think Snapdragon Stadium. I think I'm getting that right, with 30,000 plus in attendance. And it took a late Alex Morgan penalty to win it for San Diego. That wasn't the story of Providence Park even a little bit. And I think that's a credit to the players. I think that's a credit to the job that Mike Norris has done. There's always a lot of, I mean, look, when you inherit something like the job that he has over the year, there's a lot of impulse to come in and really put your stamp on things. And I think he has, but in a way that hasn't undermined all of the things that were already good. And we saw both some little changes. They pressed a little bit more. They created a few more turnovers in their attacking half. They did some things that were a little bit different than things that they did in years past. But they also just kept the core of what they do, which is be direct. And I thought in the first 15 minutes or so of the game, they tried to use the ball a little bit more to unbalance the Pride. And I didn't think they were bad, but it just wasn't quite working. And at some point in about 15 or 20 minutes into the first half, they kind of said, to heck with this, all gas, no brakes. We're just going to pump these guys. And that's exactly what happened. Oh
yeah. I mean, they played the way that they did all of last year. And that's just, throw as much at the wall as you can and see what sticks. And often something sticks. Right? They're dangerous as heck.
You bring up Christine Sinclair. In the first 15 minutes or so of the game, I thought her selection was a big mistake. Because when they were trying to use the ball a bunch and they were switching the field a lot, I was really concerned that they weren't getting the mobility out of her in the 8 spot that they get from Rocky Rodriguez, and that they weren't being able to sort of create the overloads by moving their 8 around, which is how you do it a lot when you're in a 4-3-3 and you're really trying to use the ball to sort of unbalance the opponent. You see the U.S. men's national team plays in the same basic set and kind of does exactly that. And they use their 8s a ton to be able to create those imbalances. And I just didn't think she was able to get around enough to do that. But then they were then when they went more direct, she became the exact correct selection, and she became an absolute menace for the Pride. Was involved in both of the goals in the first half, and the game was over.
Yeah, and that in particular, that second goal where she just full sprinted hard as hell up towards the Pride back line, and they just were not ready for her. She was going so hard to the point where without stopping, she got to the ball and pushed through to be able to put a ball back for Sophia Smith, which that's the easiest goal that Soph's going to have all year.
Yeah,
that
she's probably going to have a few that are exactly that easy.
That's true, but by her own volition, right? She made them easy for herself through just being unbelievably skilled, fast, everything else. I mean, the chasm between these two clubs right now is unbelievable. You think about the quality of play between the Timbers and the Thorns. Just being at both games Saturday and Sunday, it's just like a Jekyll and Hyde type of situation. It's such a joy to watch this Thorns team play. And, for fans of the sport in general, whether you're a Portland fan or not, they're must-see TV. They're a team that you have to tune in to see, not only for the star power, but the way that they play the game is just so pure and exciting. It's for soccer nerds such as yourself, it's got to be a real treat.
The Thorns are my favorite Portland soccer team to watch right now, and it is not close. It is not even close at all. The Thorns are fun to watch. They have players that, if you love soccer, are just an absolute delight. I am, and this is no surprise, because I basically just tweet about it or talk about it on this podcast every week. I am an absolute Sam Coffey stan. In part because I love central midfielders. I love really good playmaking holding midfielders in particular. And just watching the way that she dictates a game is an absolute joy. It is phenomenal. And if you love soccer, that it doesn't get a lot better than watching this Thorns team right now. And look, I've got a message, because there were more people at the Timbers game than there were at the Thorns game, right? There were more people at the Timbers game on Saturday than at the Thorns. I've got a message for every Portlander out there who is watching the Timbers but is not watching the Thorns. Stop denying yourself nice things. You deserve nice things. And the Thorns are a very nice thing. So watch the Thorns, for goodness sake. Watch the Thorns. The Timbers have not always been that rewarding to watch. Give yourself something nice. Go get some tickets to a Thorns game. Watch this team play soccer because they are an absolute joy.
To that point, tickets to Thorns games are cheaper than tickets to Timbers games. The product on the field is quite a bit better, and it felt like a more fun atmosphere. I don't know, maybe just because of the nature of that Timbers game. Obviously, it's usually louder. There's usually more people at Timbers games.
The nature of every Timbers game at Providence Park this year is lumped into the same category. They have all been bad.
Yeah, it's been rough, and understandably so. But beyond the comparisons,
on the Thorns, though.
Yeah, let's discuss the actual team that is succeeding rather than comparing them to their counterparts. We talked a lot in preseason about the depth of this Thorns team, about the talent they're returning, the veteran leadership. All of that showed itself on Sunday, and something that was talked about, but we didn't really know if it would be there after the championship last year, was the hunger. I mean, Christine Sinclair is a great example as somebody who doesn't have to come into a season going 0 to 100 very, very quick in her very first match of the club season. She could theoretically take it a little easier, save what she has left in the tank for the World Cup, but she's not doing that. She is a high-level competitor, and she's surrounded by high-level competitors of varying experience. And that's, I think, what is the most exciting about this group is not, they're returning all these best 11 players. They've got club legends and legends for country on their team. It's that they really want it. And that is not always the case for great sports teams. They can get that championship and potentially rest on their laurels, and they are not resting. They want it badly. And the change in coach appears to be zero difference in terms of not only that hunger, but the performance on the field. If anything, the continuity that the club talked about in the offseason with Mike Norris appears to be intact. This is the team we thought they were.
Yeah. And, mind you, it is one game. We have seen teams before that looked phenomenal in week one that went into rough patches and kind of went on the skids after that. And so they've got a lot of work yet in front of them. But that was sort of exactly my takeaway, what you just said coming away from the game, that this is exactly the team we thought it was. And I think that's a great thing. Now everybody's been given, all of the social medias and the likes to Hina Sugita just absolutely owning some fools to set up the Thorns. I think it was their fourth goal, their fourth and final goal, before everybody, before, I think Soph or whoever it was went out and took the microphone and said, "Are you not entertained?" Yeah. And so, she sort of got herself, if you haven't seen it, go find the video. It's great. She got herself into a place where she had the ball. She was all alone. She was, under pressure from two defenders, and she just backheels the ball between them and spins out of it and leaves one of them literally on the ground. The other one questioning life choices, before releasing Sophia Smith up the sideline, to eventually set up that goal. So that's been getting all the social media, that little heel turn from Sugita. And I get it. I understand why. I've been going back and forth in my head, though, between, in terms of the moment of the game, between that or the sort of the individual play of the game, between that and the video I tweeted yesterday that I think is just insane. There was a moment in the first half in which it was, if you remember the play, and maybe you even referred to this earlier, in which Sophia Smith put one off the post. And she was put through on goal because Sam Coffey made a really nice read on an Orlando pass. Actually, when you watch the full video, she sort of baited the pass. Then she read it, picked it off, took one touch, and then fired like a 50-yard outside of the boot ball that she put exactly in the path of Smith to put her in on goal. That was like, between those two moments, I can't decide what was sort of like the better individual effort. Yes, Sugita's gets the like, kind of the and one mixtape kind of flash, but like Coffee's gets the holy smokes, that is incredible soccer kind of stuff. So I don't know. As between the two, folks can weigh in. You can weigh in. I can't pick.
It's hard. They're both really incredible moments. Some people would give the Sugita one an edge because it eventually led to the goal. Whereas, Coffee's moment, while it was as perfect a ball as one could possibly put in there. I mean, if you put a tiny little soccer ball sized bucket exactly in the spot that would be like the 100% accuracy perfect spot, she would have put it right in there and it would have stuck in the bucket.
Like, it wouldn't have even hit the sides of the bucket on the way down. The first thing it would have hit is the bottom of the bucket.
Yes, that was how perfect it was. And Soph was so upset with herself that she didn't finish that off.
Yeah,
that's
actually the question I was going to ask you. You look like you're gearing up to say Sugita's is better because it led to a goal. Are you saying that Sophia Smith denied Sam Coffey the moment of the game?
Yes, I actually am. She normally finishes those off, and you could tell that it ate her up inside, not only because she personally missed out on a goal, but because she knows that ball from Sam was unreal. And it was a great moment, but it does get lost in the weeds when you think about the Sugita moment in a number of ways. One, obviously, that it led to the goal, and two, that Sugita, she's an unassuming person. She's very sweet, very kind. And as a result of that, I think that folks don't necessarily give her enough credit for how valuable she is to this Thorns team. I think that Sam Coffey unquestionably is one of the MVPs of this team. But when you think about pure skill, pure, ability to change a game with one touch, Hina Sugita is up there. And she has proven to be an excellent signing to fill the void and then some for the absence of Lindsay Horan while she's been on loan. That's another conversation entirely. How do you fit all of these players on the field together when Horan comes back, if she comes back in the summer? That is a major question. But Sugita deserves the credit, I think, for the pure skill she displays, but also her importance to the build up and to finishing on the attack. I mean, she ran through contact to finish her goal.
Yep.
And that is somebody who, when she runs into a lot of NWSL center backs, she is not in the same weight class. That is
and that was the
very
knock on
challenging,
her last year, right?
Yeah.
Is that she was having a hard time adjusting to the league physically.
Yeah,
she's adjusted.
Yeah, she has clearly adjusted, and not only is she capable of dealing with contact, but she's seeking contact, and that added in with her obvious world-class skill makes her an incredibly dangerous winger. And then on the other side, you have Morgan Weaver, who absolutely exploded in this game from the very beginning. Finished off
the opener,
a great one for the opener, yeah, which was weirdly, and Weaver pointed this out post game, and I looked it up, and sure enough, she was correct. Essentially the exact same play that opened up the 2022 season. Huh. Sink fired a ball in, it came off the keeper, and Weaver finished it off. It was like weirdly, and I don't have the video editing skills of others to mash those together, but maybe some folks over at PTFC or
if
we'll find it.
If we're having deja vu to open the season, I think there are a lot of people who would not object to also having some deja vu to close the season. But I think you're spot on though to sort of highlight Sugita. If you were to ask me sort of what the core of this Thorns team is, and not even necessarily speaking from a leadership perspective, but just who are sort of the central players who make this team tick, I think it's Becky Sauerbrunn. I think it's Sam Coffey. I think it's Sophia Smith, and I think it's Hina Sugita. I think that is year 4. You know, if you could only save, sort of protect 4 players to keep this team together, those would be the 4 that I would protect. And I think Sugita is often not put in that category, but I think she absolutely belongs there. In part because she can play a few different positions and very effectively, but also because, you know, you just see when you sort of sit back and watch the Thorns from a higher level, like, you know, 10,000 foot perspective, so much of the game runs through Sugita. So much of the game runs through Sugita. And that's, you can't, that is really hard to replace. Finding that person, whenever the Thorns are in a little bit of a tight spot, they often look to Sugita to get them out of it. When they need to solve a problem, it is with the ball in particular, it's often Sugita who is at the heart of solving that problem. And then she clowns fools, which is also really fun. So yeah, I think she's absolutely in that core. I think it's been a tremendous signing, and is one that I think has you know, been a bit of a game changer for the club when there were real questions going into 2022 about how the Thorns were going to manage missing Lindsey Horan. And now that Sugita has also found a place to thrive on the wing, I think there is more of a path to welcome Horan back into the team if that's what comes to pass in the summer, while not necessarily pushing you know, part of your core out of position. So I think it's a huge credit to her. She's clearly made adjustments as she's adjusted to the league. But when you have a competitor like her, somebody who is, I mean, what just oozes when you watch her is how intelligent she is. I mean, she's like, the technical stuff, that's obvious, right? Everybody sees that. But she's a brilliant player. And I don't mean brilliant in like the way you know, that like Mark Parsons would use it. I mean brilliant in the way that I would more often use it, which is like, she's really, really, really smart.
Yeah, she makes great decisions on the field,
and she outthinks opponents, and she has the technical ability to do the things that she dreams up, and that's a rare combination to have. And she's got it all, and the Thorns have feasted from it.
And what a great team for a player like her to be on, to finally be fully meshing with this group after a year under her belt. Like that's tremendous.
It is. And you know, I think she is one of the reasons why you look at this team and you look at their 2022, which is obviously very good. But then you say, well, shoot, you know, Sugita now has her first year in NWSL under her. There's some upside there. So Sophia Smith is still developing. So, I mean, just in her part of the career. So there's some upside there. Sam Coffey is only in her second year playing this position that she's played very well. Still just turned 24 at the end of last year. There's still some upside there. That's three of the 4 core people we just talked about, who you think may have unexplored upside to date. And that is exactly why you can sort of look at this team and say, hey, you know, don't assume just because they didn't make a lot of changes from 2022 that they can't be better. There's still some space to explore. And I think they made a statement in their opening game about their ability to do that. I also want to give one more shout out to somebody who I really hadn't been sure about to date, but who I thought had a really good substitute performance, not just because she scored a goal, but because I think she just had a good substitute performance. And that's Vasconcelos. I thought this was the best I've seen her in a Thorns uniform, just altogether. And you know, it's an interesting spot because there's a little bit of uncertainty about who's going to sort of fit the Yasmin Ryan role, so to speak, kind of the first attacker off the bench, winger who's going to introduce winger or forward who's going to introduce a little bit of a change of pace into the game. And I wasn't sure it was going to be her, very genuinely. I thought Izzy Diakila looked maybe more likely to fit that role, and that's still very possible.
Yeah, Hannah Betford, another one.
Hannah Betford, yeah. I basically thought those were the 3 who were kind of competing for filling that role, being a prominent piece of the team during the World Cup, but also being a really consistent, you know, I wouldn't say quite super sub, but you know, pretty regular first or second attacker off the bench. And I thought Vasconcelos actually had a performance against the Pride that suggested that she's up to it. I hadn't seen it to date. She got the start obviously in preseason. I scratched my head a little bit about that, but I think she showed why I was wrong to scratch my head about that. And that's going to be an interesting conversation going forward. And credit to her for a good substitute performance, not just in scoring a goal. She deserved the goal, frankly, because she came in and created problems for the Pride. The Thorns played through her a lot. She was constantly releasing down that left side and getting into space. And that's exactly what you want. So credit to her.
Yeah, she had a great performance. And one of the better quotes of the day too, where she said that, if Sophia Smith has the ball, get in the box.
Yeah, that's right.
Pretty simple stuff. Pretty heady play. And she made a heady play in getting in position to get that ball from Soph.
And just to go back to heaping more praise on Smith, because we do that a lot.
Yes.
The knock on Sophia Smith historically, and I think this is still there. I think this is sort of one of the few kind of weaknesses you can find in her game, is that she's not always a great, and particularly not always a super decisive box passer. She sometimes has a little bit of tunnel vision in the box, which, look, this is not a big problem for a number 9. You would far prefer that a number 9 has sort of goal scoring tunnel vision than the opposite. Right. And so this is
who do we think of that's the opposite? Who can we point to in the world of Portland soccer that's potentially an opposite?
Maybe we'll come back to that.
Okay.
But I mean that she sometimes has a little bit of tunnel vision, and there were times last year where she got into spots where it's an easy pass and it's a tap in goal. That fourth goal, she had one thing in mind: get to the byline and get the ball in for somebody like Vasconcelos to come finish. And it was one of the more decisive playmaking moves that I've seen from Smith. Look, as a striker, Smith is a really good finisher, obviously. She is, and people don't talk about this as much, I think she's the best hold-up player in the country. She is super, super, super strong and holds off defenders with ease. So the Thorns can and do play through her a ton, especially when they're sitting a little bit deeper and being a little bit more direct, which I think is their best moments. They play through her a ton. And she can either hold up for the purpose of linking with a teammate, or she can hold up for creating for herself off the dribble. But I think she's the best hold up striker in the country. If there was a knock, it's that she hasn't always made the right decisions in the box. There is an instance in which she got the ball. She had a clear design. She was going to make the play, and she did it. If she adds that to her game consistently, good night, nurse.
Yeah, there's seriously no way to stop her. There were times where teams would force her into a distributing role last year, and she might struggle, or she might get frustrated with the double and triple teams and essentially run into a wall. And yet she was still dominant, still won MVP, still had a great season. But that was definitely the drawback, and something that when Rian Wilkinson was the coach, she talked about publicly trying to work on with Soph. And you can already see the signs of that having been worked on, and her competitive desire to improve. The next game, I think, is going to be obviously a greater test against this Kansas City
huge game.
team. It's a huge game.
Really fun to have a really big game like this so early in the season. It is last year's champions in a rematch of the title game of the title match against the team that everybody sort of has pointed at as the most improved over the course of the offseason. Huge one.
Massive. And I would say that it's not as telling, I think, as a game with these two teams later in the season might be, given the injury situation that KC is in with some of its key players, Dabinia being among them.
Yep.
Given that it's early in the year, and I would say that one of these two teams is far more in form than the other in terms of what its final form is going to be come playoff time. That's the Thorns, obviously. and it has the potential to not necessarily be a tell-all for what the postseason might look like if these two teams meet again, which if you had to pick two teams to meet in the final, that would probably be the most likely matchup is a repeat, right? With San Diego maybe sneaking in there and saying, hey, what about us?
Yeah.
But regardless, it's an exciting matchup. It's on big CBS. It's a little early. It's a little brunch with the Thornies on Saturday, 9:50 a.m. kickoff.
Get brunch with the Thorns on Saturday.
Get some brunch, make some eggies, just get a little
some eggies,
egg action going. Yeah, make some eggies, man.
All right.
I'm just trying to just add a little cuteness to this podcast. It gets so self-serious sometimes. we need to.
We're gonna make some eggies. We're gonna drink some mimosas, and we're gonna
little toasty toast. Nothing wrong with that on a Saturday morning. It'll be great. It'll be perfect. No, some eggs, Benny maybe.
Oh, some Bennies.
Yeah, little Bennies. That would be excellent. Some OJ. Yeah, that all sounds like a good morning to enjoy the Thorns, and I think it'll be a competitive and exciting match. Despite the injuries that KC is dealing with, that's a team that's got a lot to prove, and what better opportunity to prove oneself than against the team that outmatched you in that championship game, and to prove like, hey, we're here. We want to contend with these people. So it's big.
And for the Thorns, I think it's all upside, right? It's a road game, so there's not a ton of pressure. It's a road game against a good team, so there's not a ton of pressure. But it's also one where if they win, like the message is out for the league. Like if you want to come at the Queens, you best not miss. And so it's a huge opportunity, I think, for the Thorns really to send a message. If they go into KC and they do even what they did to him last year, KC drew that game in Kansas City last year, but that was a really fortunate draw. The Thorns were all over them in Kansas City, and I think it set the tone that game really for what we saw in the title, which was not particularly competitive. And if the Thorns go and do that again, message is out. And that would be pretty cool. Thorns as villains, NWSL tyrants, is something that I embrace wholeheartedly, and I think that's exactly the position that they would put themselves in.
Yeah, and they potentially will be wearing their villain uniforms with the new white kits with the Ed Hardy tattoo vibes. And that has kind of been part of the embracing of those kits, is the idea that they're kind of like the bad girl kits. I could
the
see
Black
it.
Rose was really the first time where I was like, all right, we are the dark side.
That was pretty cool. I kind of wish that
still the best kit in NWSL history, by the way.
Oh yeah,
maybe definitely. In America, like one of the best kits in American soccer history.
Yeah, it's an awesome one, and like. A ton of people own it. You see it all over the place whenever you go to Thorns games. So that made me think too of the warm-up kit that the Thorns had on Sunday.
It's like the tattoo removal kit where they're like, all right, we removed the chest tattoo. Now it's just we just got the shoulders.
Yeah, and it was black and red, and it was really cool. I think that something like that would be an interesting alternate jersey if you're keeping with the tattooed rose vibes. But either way, Saturday morning, make some eggies, enjoy the Thorns. It'll be on at 9:50 a.m. on CBS. That should be an exciting one. Later in the day, in the evening time, let's say,
when you're hungover from the mimosas.
When your headache sets in because you haven't had a mimosi in a few hours. The Portland Timbers will kick off, and you'll just put your face in your hands and say, oh God, I need an Excedrin. Right. It's been a rough go for the Timbers.
How much Excedrin do you think Gio Savarese has taken over the last few weeks? We're talking like bottles, right?
Hopefully not more than is prescribed, let's say that. But Gio has had plenty of headaches, plenty of things to worry about. The injuries are obviously the big one. It has decimated their entire lineup to a point of not even fielding a competitive team for the last 2 weeks.
More than decimated.
Yes, annihilated.
You want nerdiness here?
Yeah, go for
decimated actually means to remove 10% of something. So his lineup has been more than decimated.
Really?
Yeah. Deci.
Yeah, I get it. But like, wow, I didn't know that.
That's, I mean, it's taken on sort of a colloquial definition of like, to
destruction,
destroy entirely. But strictly speaking, it means to remove or take away 10% of something. Wow. So we are beyond decimation.
No, we are beyond 10%. Take that times like 8, essentially. They're playing at like 20% capacity right now with the guys that are out. And more out now. You got the potential for Marvin Luria to have a hamstring issue. You got the potential for an extended absence for David Bingham with his very clear hamstring injury. That one looked worse than Luria's. Luria's almost looked like he was just cramping up. So I wouldn't necessarily expect him to even be out on Saturday. But they are getting a couple guys back. Dyrone Espria, David Ayala should be available on Saturday. Evander should be available on Saturday. How many minutes they can play probably depends on the individual and how they're recovering from their specific injury. I mean, you'd anticipate Evander would play more than the other two.
I think that's right. Sure. Given that especially Espria and Ayala missed all, or refreshing my memory, maybe almost all of preseason, you've got to think that they're probably not available for more than a 15 to 20 minute stretch in their first outing. And it's probably a couple or a few weeks yet until they're ready to, play starters minutes. Evander, you'd hope, would be more prepared to step back into a starting role, given that it's only been a couple week layoff.
Yes. And that'll be helpful. And I think that it will make some things easier. But regardless of the personnel who's on the field right now, the Timbers are just playing wooden spoon soccer across the board. It's hard to find really a lot of positives in the season so far beyond that. Obviously the season opening victory over Sporting KC and the nice moment for Tegi Ikoba in what was otherwise an absolute thrashing down in Atlanta.
And Saturday against the Galaxy was a thrashing of every fan who tuned in to watch that game.
Yeah, if you chose to watch
we lost
that game
5-1.
Start to finish.
Like the teams drew 0-0, but we lost 5-1.
It was a major L. And as a journalist who is paid to attend these games in full, it's one of those ones that you're kind of like, oh, what could I have been doing with my evening? It's like you go to work if you're a normal person, if you have like an actual job where you're going in 9 to 5 and there's just nothing to do the entire day, but your job indicates that you cannot, depart from your desk or do something else. I mean, you could play games on your computer, but you're still in the office. You're not relaxed. There's this tension in your body. And that's what it's like watching the Timbers right now. It's just like, oh God, another one of these. But, that's not a disparagement to any of these individual players. Obviously they're trying mostly. And, Gio is trying to make it work, and it's
he's
a messy situation with the injuries. Yeah, it's playing with like a 20% deck of cards right now. He's got like the not a lot of face cards in the deck for Gio right now. A
couple jokers.
It's rough. Yeah. They got rid of one of their favorite jokers last year when they got rid of JVR. He was quite the entertainer despite
entertain somebody
everything. Yeah, I laughed sometimes. But either way, this has been a really difficult stretch for the Timbers. Obviously, another storyline that popped up out of that game was Alija Ivicic and his beef with Gio Savarese that appears to have tempered down a bit. Things have cooled off as the days have gone by, but he did reach out to me and he said that, Gio Savarese was essentially lying, saying that he wasn't healthy going into this game, that he's been healthy since day one of the season. And Gio has opted for Bingham more often than not in goal. Now the dynamic has shifted a bit to where things are a little less tense. Gio thinks that the folks have over dramatized this a bit. He spoke a lot about the locker room being a positive environment and, took the situation with Eric Williamson last year as an example. Eric didn't play in the final game of the year. Gio at the time said it was about effort and training. After the game, Eric posts a meme on his Instagram.
Fudge around and find out.
Yeah, that meme. And everything seemed a little tenuous, and there started to be swirling discussion online about, is Williamson going to get traded? He's still here. He's playing and thriving, I think.
Thriving is a strong word,
position.
but go ahead.
Sure. Maybe an overstep, but I think he's doing better than the rest of his teammates in general.
Fair. Low bar, but fair.
But yeah, it's look, there are, as Gio said yesterday, there are obviously going to be disagreements among players and coaches. That's inevitable. The thing to keep an eye on is whether or not this is a sign of a larger cultural issue, right? Because losing begets insecurity, begets conflict and issues for individual players who might be looking to where the grass is greener, might be unhappy in their present situation, might be having emotions bubble over that have been there for a while. It still, I think, is something to keep an eye on. I think that, we don't want to over dramatize these things, but I'm still obviously going to report on them if they happen. It's part of the deal.
That's literally your job, right?
Correct.
Because otherwise you're just the guy sitting in your office playing games on your computer all day. That's literally your job, so you have to do it. Look, I've got a few thoughts about this. I think Gio's comments were exactly what you'd expect him to say, exactly kind of what he needs to say in that instance. I mean, obviously he has to sort of present that united and calm front, and that's what he should have done, and fine. I don't begrudge that at all. I think there's obviously an issue here. It is true. I completely accept the proposition that in every team, in every season, there are locker room conflicts and things like that. And 99.9% of the time, frankly, until a few months ago, 100% of the time with this club, they don't really bubble up into the public sphere. Now they're bubbling up in the public sphere, and it's happened twice in the last 6 games. And so I don't think, I think it's obvious that there's an issue there. And, I don't know whose fault that issue is. I just don't have the knowledge and the visibility into the sort of situations to know whose fault that is. I don't know if Ivicic is justifiably upset or not. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. Maybe he hasn't been training well. Maybe he has been hurt. I don't know. That's not knowledge that I have, and I'm not going to speculate about it. But I also think Alias went too far. I think coming out in the media and saying, as you put it, essentially saying that your coach is lying, using that word, lie, that's too far, and that's definitely not productive. It's not good for anybody, and it's not productive for the locker room. And so, I don't know if he's going to play next week. I guess I'd be a little bit surprised. They don't have a ton of other options. Hunter Sulte is there, but that's a pretty. Candidly, been following the Timbers closely for well over a decade now. This is the first. We haven't seen somebody make that kind of a statement in the public, explicitly in the public too. It's not like this is a hot mic situation. Like, for the purpose of public consumption about a coach. And there have been guys who have had conflicts with coaches before. That has happened, I would venture to say, dozens of times.
With every coach over the years. Yeah, absolutely.
There are constantly guys who think they should get more playing time. There are always guys who think they're healthy and ready to go, and coaches or training staff are holding them back. That happens all the time, but we've not seen something like this. And the fact that it is coming on the heels of what happened with Williamson at the end of last season, in the final game of last season, I think warrants some real concern about whether there is a broader problem within the locker room right now. You know, and I think they should be taking that seriously. And frankly, notwithstanding Gio's comments, I would bet pretty firmly that they are.
Right, and Gio maintains the notion that this is a strong locker room, that they have positive relationships, and that it's more like a family, in that you're going to have disagreements with your family, but the next day you'll be okay, right? You know, a sibling, a cousin, a parent, you know, that type of dynamic. But it is different tangibly because of the power dynamics at play, because of the way that, you know, teams control individual players' careers, their financial fortunes. That has to be considered as well. And this is definitely something to keep an eye on in terms of the broader culture within the organization, within the team, in the future. In terms of the soccer, that hasn't helped those emotions or those issues at all, because it's been extremely brutal. What did you see Saturday, beyond the scoreless match, beyond the missing players? What between the lines is standing out to you?
I saw 22 guys running around the field trying to beat each other up with wooden spoons. I mean, those were two really bad teams on the field. And yes, there were injury absences, there were international absences. That certainly plays a part in all of this. This was a game of two teams who had been struggling in the opening weeks of the season. And I think there was a question about who was just starting slow and who was bad. And I don't think you can come out of that game with any impression other than right now, both those teams are bad. Like, two non-playoff teams right now. Technically, the Timbers are somehow in the above the playoff line with 4 points through 5 games. That is an artifact of the moment.
If the season ended now, sir, if it ended now, your Portland Timbers, who have been, let's call it, abysmal the last 2 weeks, would be playing for an opportunity to get into the playoffs in the 8-9 matchup. Cup. The play-in. They could make a run, sir, to MLS Cup.
The most spectacularly improbable run in the history of sports. I mean, those were two non-playoff teams, and they were. It was terrible soccer to watch. It was bad soccer altogether. I thought the Timbers made some adjustments that helped them over the course of the game. In the first half hour, I think Ricky Puig was basically getting wherever he wanted to go and was getting the ball in dangerous spots. And it frankly looked like it was not going to be a 0-0 draw. Because it looked like, you know, notwithstanding their problems up front, and they have real problems up front. They have real problems on the wings. But it looked like, notwithstanding those things, that they were going to find a way to score a goal because they were just creating too many dangerous situations. The Timbers, I thought, did a nice job as the first half went along of quieting down Puig, basically parking somebody in his lap. Kind of took him out of the game. And after that, the Galaxy just had nothing. They had no ideas about how to create a goal-scoring chance once the Timbers made it a little bit harder for Puig. And so, you know, I think the credit to the Timbers for doing that. I think the optimists' take on this game, if you want to just smoke a bunch of hopium, is that, you know, we've seen sort of a pattern over Gio Savarese's term of them really struggling, then him kind of stripping the things tactically down to the bones, them looking pretty dreary and dreadful, but not porous for a couple of weeks before they slowly start building back up. Certainly that's exactly what happened in 2018 when they were letting in tons of goals. They got pumped at the New York Red Bulls. I was at that game. It was brutal. And then they went to Dallas. They got into the Christmas tree. They ground out a dreadful 0-0 draw, and they kind of slowly built up from there. I think maybe this performance against the Galaxy could have been one of those where they just kind of stripped things down to the studs and played, you know, just pretty negative. They had 30% possession at home against a team that's bad. Played pretty negative soccer just to kind of get things stabilized and not concede a ton. and they got a point out of it, right? So, maybe it's one of those, but man, that was, it wasn't good. It was just really, really bad soccer. And the Timbers played really, really bad soccer. And I think you've got to take a lot of that hopium to see this as a turning point at this stage. Maybe it'll end up being that, but it didn't look like it.
Yeah, and the potential wake-up call from said hopium addiction would be the trip down to Texas.
And the April schedule altogether.
The April schedule in general is absolutely brutal.
They could play better soccer than they've played for the first month and still lose all 5 games in April.
Right. You start with this game in FC Dallas on Saturday, right?
They're good. That's a place where the Timbers have gotten crushed many times before.
Yes, including last time they took a trip down there last season against a less experienced FC Dallas team than there is now, with a far fuller and complete roster at the time. Then you go on the road to Vancouver. Not an easy game.
Not an easy game. I mean, maybe the most winnable of the games in the month, because Vancouver's not very good.
No, they're
still a road game, though.
Yeah, still a road game. Still a challenging point in the season for the Timbers as they continue to get guys back, right? You come back home, you play the Sounders. Sounders are better than the Timbers right now.
By a lot.
Far and away. By a lot. And 2 road games after that in Cincinnati and St. Louis. St. Louis are world beaters right now somehow. And Cincinnati's a good team. And all 5 of those games, given the current form of the Timbers, given the uncertainty of their personnel, those are 5 potential L's. And if that is the case, the conversation changes around this team about, can we fight into the playoffs versus are we going to avoid having like the worst record in the league? And
at the end of April, they'll be a quarter of the way through the season.
Yeah, that's 1 quarter of the way through the year. A lot of different factors at play, a lot of other games beyond the MLS regular season that you're going to have to fit in to the schedule. A lot of who knows with who's going to be available. It's real rocky right now. And, it's easy for people like us to just operate in the moment, to overreact to what is currently happening. And I'm sure there were plenty of examples of that last year between both of the teams, where on this podcast we went on diatribes that ended up being completely wrong. But right now the vibes are pretty clearly bad. And it's to a point where you're wondering if they can salvage it, not when are they going to salvage it.
Yeah, and they're going to have to be a lot better in order to get any meaningful number of points from these next 5 games. And if they don't, then we really will be in a place where we're going to be talking about whether they are too far behind the 8 ball to get out again, just like last year. Because when March problems turn into April problems, or even May problems, is when seasons get lost. And that's what happened in 2022. And it is not hard to look and you don't have to stare deep into the crystal ball to see that that's a real possibility for 2023 as well. So they do have, they also have Frank Boley, who appears to be ready to play some minutes at Dallas. We don't know if he's good yet. So I mean, but that's another card in the short deck that Savares has been playing with. And they do figure over the course of this month to get a little bit healthier as they get some guys back. Sebastian Blanco might play soccer at some point. I don't think anybody on the outside knows when that could be, or whether he's going to be able to be at or even close to his best. But that's also a possibility. So, but I think those are the kinds of things that the Timbers are looking for hope right now. And I think when you look at where they've been and you look at the guys who they have to come back, I mean, David Ayala is not likely to be a savior, right? April Dyrone Asprilla is not likely to be a savior. October Dyrone Asprilla might be a different conversation, but April Dyrone Asprilla is not likely to be a savior.
Give the man 6 months.
That's right.
Then it's time.
That's right. I think Frank Boley, whether he can be a difference maker, is totally remains to be seen. even when you look further down the road, is Jimmy Chara going to be a savior? He's been a solid guy for the Timbers the last few years, but I don't think he's and he's shown when the team has looked to him to do so that he's not the kind of player who's going to put the team on his back. And so even with the guys who are missing, I don't think there's an obvious knight in shining armor. And that's concerning.
Yeah, I think if one exists, it rarely, if ever, does in this sport. But if one exists, it's Evander, right? And the jury's still out. He's still making his way through his first season in MLS, which, as we know, with a lot of these star players, it usually takes about a year before they really have their feet under them, adjust to the speed of the game in the league, and find their footing, if you will. And he's been hurt. So that's delayed that potential development and integration even more. He's a guy that could be a difference maker in that way, can be a legit star in MLS. But if he's playing with a bunch of guys that have been in poor form and they don't have everybody around him that they need to have around him in order for him to have some modicum of success.
And without a clearly defined role.
Yeah, and without a clearly defined role, that's a recipe for continued question marks for him specifically, and continued failure and struggles for the team generally. So 5:30 p.m. Pacific on Saturday at FC Dallas.
Bring
that
your
game's
Excedrin.
free. Bring your Excedrin.
BYOE. Bring your own Excedrin.
Yeah. You'll be recovering from your morning mimosi with the Thornies, and yes, you will probably need some Excedrin, not only for the hangover that you're having in the evening, which,
to be clear, this is not sponsored content.
No, not even remotely. We are not sponsored by over-the-counter or prescription drugs. That's or right. The companies that produce them, thankfully.
This is not pharma made in Portland.
No, it is not.
Although the Timbers make it feel like it sometimes, it is not pharma made in Portland.
Thankfully. But 5:30 on Saturday, and that one's on Apple TV for free. Don't need an MLS season pass subscription for that game. That's the case for a handful throughout the season, which I think is good for the league to have people preview it, but also hard to justify sometimes the subscription when so many of them are free. I don't know. It's a weird dynamic, but either way, no matter what, you can watch it on that app on Saturday.
And if you opt to watch Ted Lasso instead of the Timbers at 5:30 on Apple TV on Saturday, I won't begrudge you. But tune in for the Thorns.
More fun. Yes, definitely tune in for the Thorns Saturday morning. And if you can choose. It's choose your own adventure for the evening. But I'll be watching both of them. I'll be covering both of them. Keep an eye for coverage of that game on OregonLive.com and both games on OregonLive.com. Podcast next week, we will discuss at length what happens in both of those games. Should be an interesting weekend regardless. Any parting thoughts and any things bothering you this week that you want to share with the world, Chris?
I mean, let's fit in a Weather Made in Portland segment because it's been truly bizarre. And I feel like the Blossoms are now totally confused because we've been bouncing, like just ping-ponging back and forth between like 60 and sunny and almost snowing. So,
or actually
snowing. Yeah. So I would like to move to a more stable weather pattern than that. I think, the trees and all that would also appreciate that. And certainly the soccer watching as well. But yeah, other than that, that's my biggest, I think, closing thought. Wish the weather was better.
I think I definitely agree with you. And I think we have found some kind of metaphor in the world around us here.
That's right.
You ready?
The Thorns are the 60 and sunny. The Timbers are the snowing or almost snowing.
Exactly. And that is Weather Made in Portland for this week. It serves as a metaphor for the soccer watching experience of those who root for both of these clubs. And that will wrap it up for us this week on Soccer Maiden Portland. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Maiden PDX. Like us, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a review if you so choose. And until next week, we'll be back to chat more Timbers and Thorns. Thanks for joining us.